We've been looking at different ways of how fraction is related to division. So the first one we looked at how we could write division as a fraction, and then we looked at rewriting quotients as mixed numbers. And so today we're going to move into looking at how we can use multiplication to divide. So we can connect dividing by a fraction to multiplication. So you're going to be dividing a whole number by a fraction, and we're going to relate it to using multiplication. So if we take a look at our first problem, it says a sandwich shop prepares for large wraps and cuts them into fourths. Each fourth is one serving. William buys 5 whole wraps for a party. How many servings in all does he get? Solve this problem any way you choose. So what's nice is they've already visually shown this for us, that I have one wrap is going to have 4 servings. So if I take a look at this, one wrap has 4 servings. So this is going to be equal to 4 servings. Okay, so 4 servings. And if I have 5 wraps, I'm going to take the 4 servings that I have in one wrap and multiply that by 5. And I end up with 20 servings. So that's how I can relate a fraction to a fraction to multiplication, because if I were to write this out, this would be 5 divided by 1/4, because I had 1/4 servings. And if I take each one of those wraps and I divide it into 4 pieces, I end up with 20. So there you can see how 4 times 5, look right here, I did 4 times 5 and I ended up with 20. That's how they relate. Okay, let's move into your look back. Write an equation that represents the problems about wrap. We were so on it that I already did that. So the two equations that I had was I had 5 divided by 1/4 is equal to 20, or 5 times 4 is equal to 20. So either one of those equations would work to represent the problem that we just did. All right, so let's go ahead and move into your visual learning. And so we're looking at how dividing by a fraction is related to multiplication. So it says our problem that we're going to look at: if a bottle of liquid plant food contains 3 cups, how many plants will you be able to feed? And then we need to explain why our answer is going to make sense. So each plant cup, or I'm going to use 1/8 cup per plant. And so right here, if you take a look at this question, it says how many 1/8 are in 3. So if I write that as an equation, what it's going to be is I'm going to do 3 divided by 1/8. And so visually, if you look at this, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8 in one of these. So if I have 8 here, I have another 8 here, I have another 8 here. So it's 3 times 8 equals 24. So look right here, 24 times 1/8 equals 3. So here's how I can check it using multiplication. So 3 divided by 20, or divided by 1/8, is going to be 24, because I have 24 pieces in the 3. And so again, notice that what we did was we did 3 times 8, and that's how we ended up with 24. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the bottom problem. And it says use the same numbers. Let me get my color and then I'll keep reading. Use the same numbers in the multiplication equation. 15 times 1/3 equals 5 to write a division equation. Then draw a diagram to show that your division equation makes sense. So what I would do is I would take my total here, which was 5, and I'm going to divide that by 1/3. And when I divide that by 1/3, I'm going to get 15. Now here's why that works. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw out my 5 squares. So again, it's really nice if you're struggling, use the visual to help you. Visuals are very nice when dividing with fractions. So I divide it into 3 pieces, right? And when I divide it into 3 pieces and I count my number of pieces, I have 1, 2, 3. So if I have 3 here, I have 6 here, 9, 12, 15. That's how I know that my answer makes sense. All right, let's go ahead and move into your guided practice. And so it's explained how to use multiplication to find 4 divided by 1/5. And so what we would do is we would, since there are going to be 5/5 in each hole. Okay, so I have 5/5 in each hole. Boop. Didn't do my thumb space there in each hole. I would take 4 times 5. And when I take 4 times 5, I end up with 20. So my answer is going to be 20. So if I look at this with division, relate it back to division, 4 divided by 1/5 is equal to 20. Let me put my little decimals. Okay, next problem, we look at number 2. It says, show how to use multiplication to check your answer in exercise 1. So what we would do is if I rewrote this as a multiplication problem, so number 2, I'm going to bring it over here, would be 20 pieces, right? So I had 20 as my answer, times 1/5. And we know that when we do 20 over 1, we times that by 1/5. I end up with 20/5, which then equals 4. So I had 4, 1/5, and 20 here. I had 4, 1/5, and 20 here. So my answer checks out. Okay, we're going to do find 3 divided by 1/10. And so when I do find 3 divided by 1/10, what I can do is I could draw out my squares if I need to. So if you still need to do that visual, go ahead and do that visual. And what I would do is I'd actually probably would just do one square, and I'm going to divide it into 10. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it into fifths. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my fifths. And I'm just going to go ahead with my fifths. I'm going to take this, I'm going to divide it in half. Now I have my tenths. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here I have 10, which means in this one I'm going to have 10, which means in this one I'm going to have 10. So I will have 30 as my answer. Draw a model. So they do want us to draw a model on this one. Draw a model to find 2 divided by 1/6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw. I like squares more than circles because it's easier to divide it up. And I'm going to divide it into 6. So I'm going to divide it into thirds first. So remember that when we're dividing, we always use one less line than what we need. So I divide it into thirds. So I only need 2 lines. And then I'm going to take my thirds. I'm going to divide them into half. And when I look here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So my answer here is going to be 12. To check this, what I would do is I'm going to do 12 times 1/6. And I want to see if that's going to equal 2. So if I write 12 over 1 and I do my cross canceling, 6 becomes 1, 12 becomes 2. My answer is 2. So my multiplication works. So for your independent practice, what you're going to do is you're going to use the model to help you. And so really it's a lot of here, if I have 3, I have 1/4. I look at how many fourths I have in each one of these. And then down here, you don't need to draw a model if you don't want to. So these ones are going to be an optional model drawing. I like them. It helps me see it visually, but you don't necessarily need to do that today. So on this side, you are going to go ahead and do 6 through 12 all. And then in your math practices and problem solving, I would like for you to do problem 13. I would like for you to go ahead and do problem 15. I would like for you to do problem 17 and 18. So those are the problems that I'd like for you to do in your independent practice for today's lesson.